When you import new files into your Lightroom catalogue, you need to be methodical about where you store them, how you name them, and what other processing you might apply to them on import. So for this session, we're going to assume you have a recently shot project stored on a memory card. And we obviously need to tell Lightroom to import those new images. And this can be done via the import command, which is at the bottom of the navigation panel, or you can also go to File and Import Photos and Video. And clicking on either of these methods will bring up the import dialog box. But there's actually a slicker way to achieve this, which is to tell Lightroom to open the import dialog automatically when it detects that a memory card is connected. And you can ensure this happens by going to Lightroom's preference settings and ensuring that Show Import Dialog when a memory card is detected is checked. And then, when you connect a card, you'll find that it automatically brings up the import dialog, which looks like this. So you'll see here that we've set Lightroom to import all the images it finds on the card. Specifically, it's going to copy them to our computer and then add them to, or more accurately reference them in, the Lightroom catalogue. If you were just adding images from an existing folder on your computer, you would have to select that folder in the navigation pane on the left. And the option would then be to simply add the photos to the catalogue. So I would go down to these folders here, my Macintosh drive or my external drives, to source ready shot photos that needed to be referenced in the Lightroom catalogue. But if you're doing a fresh shoot on a card, then that's going to come up on import. The thing to remember is that Lightroom isn't physically adding the images to your catalogue. All it's doing is creating a link or a reference to your files so that they'll be accessible from within Lightroom. When you're importing photos for the first time, it has to both add them to the computer's drive and also create that catalogue reference to them. You'll notice that all these thumbnails have a little tick by them which shows that they're going to be imported because I've pressed check all. If there were some images that I didn't want to import, perhaps that one, I can just uncheck it, but I prefer to import everything and then make my decisions as to what's going to be deleted from within Lightroom. So let's have a look at this right-hand panel of options to see how we can control how the import process is going to work. So first up, we have a tab called File Handling. And in here we have options to set the size of our image previews. Image previews are those versions of the files that Lightroom is going to bring up in the workspace. Now you have an option here to create a 1:1 size preview, which is very large and takes a long time to generate. And I find that if you just want a decent preview to view your images on import, then it's better to opt for the standard size previews. I'm also going to check Don't Import Suspected Duplicates here, and this will ensure that files are not referenced twice in the catalogue, which would confuse matters. And if you're adding previously shot images from existing folders to your catalogue, it's a really good thing to have this option checked. If you wish, you can also make a backup of the files you're going to import to another location by checking this Make a Second Copy To box, and you'd simply select an external drive to make a copy of your raw files to. But I'm hoping to show you on this course that while that's very good practice, a better route is to adopt a systematic backing up of your files with an additional program like ChronoSync. There'll be more on that in a later session, so for now it's your call as to whether to make a dupe of your files here. Moving on, we have the ability with Lightroom to rename our files on import, which is really helpful when it comes to building your archive. So if you check Rename Files here, we can look at some of the ways that we can create useful file names for our images. At the moment, we're set to name our files simply according to the file name as created by the camera in the template box here. I also like to select uppercase for the raw file extension, which indicates the originating camera system. And you'll see here a sample of how the first file in our sequence would look. But if we access the template editor's drop-down menu here, we can find additional ways of naming our files. So for example, I could go with shoot name and original file number here, which would enable me to enter a customized text to precede the file name and there's a sample of how the file name would look, which can be kind of useful if you want to source images later on or recognize them quickly. So I advise you to explore those options and see which would work for you, but it may well be that you want to choose a set of file identifiers which are not listed as part of an existing preset. Fortunately, we can use the template editor to create a completely bespoke file naming system. So let's take a simple naming scheme like date and file name, and this time we're going to go to Edit to bring up the template editor for the file naming system. So with this date and file name preset selected, there's something I'd like to add here, which is my own name just as a prefix to the file name. So I'm just going to type in Cymax and an underscore there and see how this is looking. So we've got Cymax and then the date, which is presented in the form of the year first, which makes it easier to source jobs. You can source by the year, then the month and the day. I'd like to get rid of that little hyphen. So I'm going to type in there or click in there and just remove that hyphen and put an underscore, which I think looks tidier. And our file name is actually going to be the date and then an underscore and then the file name itself, which will be the number generated by the camera, and then the suffix. And what I'll do now is save that as a new preset. So save current settings as a new preset. I've actually got this ready set up as my preset called Cymax, and that remains as my file naming protocol. So here's a sample, Cymax underscore date and then the file name. And I like to send images out with my name, so you might incorporate your company name somehow. It's good practice and you can retain control over your images. We now have the option to apply various develop and basic metadata settings at the time of import with this Apply During Import tab. We'll be looking at the amazing tools available to us in Lightroom for developing images in future sessions, but for now it's worth noting that you can save a lot of time by applying some of these commonly applied develop settings in the form of a preset to your shots right now. So from this drop-down list, you can choose one of Lightroom's develop presets, or preferably one that you've set up already in the develop module. For example, you might like to apply a certain amount of sharpening and a white balance control and possibly lens distortion controls as standard. You can set these up as a preset in the develop module and have them come up in this box. Mine's actually called import. So I'm going to pop import in there from the drop down menu, and that group of settings will be applied to all of these images on import, saving me a huge amount of time. In the same way, you can choose to apply certain very general keywords to your images in the keyword field. You might like to simply enter the name of your client here and a job identifier, so I'm going to enter my client's name and then the name of the road on which the property is situated, and that provides quite a useful way of sourcing your images in your catalogue at a later date. And if you wish, you can set up a customized preset for the metadata that's going to be attached to your file. So if you go into this box and edit the presets, you can enter in here your identity as the creator and owner of the copyright of the images, your contact details, etc. Any number of fields that you want to include. You can set up a new preset according to your requirements. I'm not going to do that because I have one set up as basic metadata, which basically includes all the information that I want to send out attached to my files. Finally, we're going to tell Lightroom where we want to physically store our images. So scrolling down, we have the Destination tab, and in here we have a number of ways of filing our images, and I always like to create a subfolder with the name of the client and the shoot to just make identification easier if I'm browsing through my files. So I'm going to enter in here again the client name first, followed by the job name, and then it's simply a question of deciding where I want to store that folder. Now I might put it on the computer's main drive, the hard drive here, but I prefer to use an exterior drive. So I'm going to put it on my Lacy backup drive and navigate to my images folder and my Lightroom imported folder. So by clicking on that parent folder, this subfolder, Tate Valletta, is going to be created within that folder. And what I do later on is that I run Chronosync and I make sure that all the files that are on that LaCie backup drive are mirrored onto another drive. So that's why I prefer to do my duplicate making at that stage of the workflow rather than at the beginning creating a duplicate of the file. So that's all we need to do. It may seem a bit laborious at first, but having set up our general import settings and presets for commercial shoots, these will generally remain the same whenever we import commercial shoot images. All we need to change are the keywords for the job if we choose to use them, and the name of the subfolder in which to store the images. We can then very quickly move towards the all-important import button down here. And when we do that, we can see the progress monitor here doing its thing as Lightroom copies those new images to our chosen drive, naming them according to our settings and applying any developed presets, and referencing them as records in our Lightroom catalog. It will then start to generate preview images based on our settings. Remember, these are not the actual files, just Lightroom's rendition of the data contained in the file. So there we have it, from card to computer and into the Lightroom catalog. We're now ready to get working with our images.